In this video, we're going to have a look at how we can manage our data in Pinecone. So we first start off by making sure we have the Pinecone client installed. And then we import Pinecone, initialize your connection to Pinecone. Again, if you need to, you will need to insert your API here, which you can get from app.pinecone.io. You need to initialize a connection to an index. If you haven't created an index, you just use pinecone.create_index to create that. And once you've created your index and connected to it, you can have a look at the index statistics. So we use this method here, and we see the dimensionality of our index is 128, and we don't have any namespaces set up. We just have this empty namespace, which is the default, and you can see that we have 10,003 vectors. So let's have a look at how we can fetch those vectors. So not querying and searching, but just fetching those vectors by ID. So all we do to do that is we specify the index.fetch method here, and we pass a list of the IDs that we'd like to see. So we run that, and we'll see that we return everything in there. So scroll up a little bit, we see ID1 in here. We have ID1 and the values. And here we also have ID0 and its values. So to update that, note that we don't have a separate method for updating existing vectors or upserting new vectors. We just use upsert for both. If the ID already exists, then the existing vector will be replaced with whatever you've passed here. Now we need to make sure that in our vectors here, we're passing a list, but that list must contain tuples where we have our ID value here and our vector values here. So we'll run that, and we see that we've upserted 1. So now let's have a look at what this now looks like. So we want to have a look at number 0, ID 0. And you see that we now have that updated vector. So we can also delete vectors. And again, this is quite simple. We just write index delete. We pass out IDs like we did with the fetch here. So let's take ID1, and we can go ahead and delete that. Okay. And now if we try and index.fetch IDs and we try and fetch ID1, we see that there's nothing there anymore. It doesn't exist. And if you have namespaces in your index, so up here we just have this default empty namespace, but if you have defined namespaces, you can also specify the namespace that you'd like to delete vectors from. So for example, if we had one called example namespace, and with this you can also use, rather than specifying vector, these specific IDs. If you'd like to delete all vectors, you can write delete all equals true as well. So that's it for managing your data in Pinecone.